We continue today the end of Perek Ches. Just to wrap it up, we're holding after the Milchama of Gideon HaShofet, who through his Milchama al Pineis shelo hoyo kaneis hazeh b'mois HaShoftim v'l'shein haradak was matzliach with a very small army to win the war against the Midyanim. The last time we learned about the ephod that Gideon made, and he was matzig. He presented it in Ofra, which was the shtot that he lived in, and that ephod was questioned Rishonim Bal Kaponim. At the end it says, Vayiznu kol Yisrael acharov, they took it as Avodah Zarah. And that, Vayile Gideon uleveisoi lemoikesh. Pasuk Chav Zayin at the end, it says the fact that he put the ephod, even though the ephod was b'yisoidoi, the kavanah of Gideon was a positive intention, yet because he was done, the Oisen Ayomi was an ephod and trophim, in a connotation which is associated with Avodah Zarah, Vayilo lemoikesh. What's the moikesh? We're going to see in a minute. Vatishko ha'oretz arboim shana b'mei Gideon. I'd like to read the next 4 psukim and focus on it. Vayelech Yerubal ben Yoyosh vayeshev bebeise. All of a sudden, if you remember in the beginning, the father of Gideon was Yoyosh. Yoyosh was a koimel Avodah Zarah. He was an Ovid Avodah Zarah. And when he had the Maisa that he was broke the Mizbeach, people came to him and told him, your son did it, we have to kill him. And he gave him a name, Yerubal, Yoriv Habal. If the Baal is going to be Take the Unzere Elohus, the Baal of Avodah Zarah is as powerful as people fantasize, he should take the revenge in Gideon. What do we have to mix in? But he changed his name from Gideon to Yerubal. Now Vibalti added on a shame of Avodah Zarah, Yorev Baal, even though his kavanah was a positive. The Kazakh, that the Chido, I didn't bring it down, but the Chido in Michektane says, Vayile leGidon lebeis lemoki irtze b'askor hashmoi gamef shalom amein ze ma shomu Chazal shal yedei Sidor HaGemorah b'Basri daf Kuf Yud al yedei shehifrish Moshe bnoi Gershon Avodah Zarah yotze mimenu Menashe. The reason why he was mafrish, he made a t'nai with his Yisrei, that one child will go to Avodah Zarah. Bibal Moshe Rabbeinu gemacht hazat t'nai, Menashe Harosho came out mitzetzov because of this afrosha. Why? Well, the Gemara state in Sanhedrin daf Samachei Akimas Sfosov Ave Maise. The fact that he gave him Azaz sort night, says the Chido, Beoifen Afal Pi Shenishar Gershu B'Kedushes Yisrael B'Kol Mokom Bris Krusel L'Sfosayim. So do a bris the Gemara in the Moed Kotten in daf Yutches Bris Krusel L'Sfosayim. V'al Yedei Keno Yachizo L'Sitroacho B'Gershon Ve'Osa Shelo Yat Shiyotze Menu Menashe. Afkan על ידי שקורא יויש שם בנו ירובעל, שכל רבו עבודת זרה, אף על פי שכוונתו איסור להציל בנו על ידי כן, he didn't give it a name to perpetuate עבודת זרה, he gave a name in order, he says, מה נפשך, if the Baal is Elohim, לא זה מחם, you should be the one. אף על פי שכוונתו להציל בנו איסור רוישה במקצס, שהשליט הסטראח ובמייס יודוב. ואף על פי שהויסה כוונוסו לשם שמיים, נהפך עבודו לעבודת זרה, בתאויס ישראל אחרוב, וזהו שאומר, ויהי לגידון לבייסו כמויקש. וצולוימה, אף על פי שעיקר שמוי נשאר גידון, מכל מקום כיוון שגם בשם ירובעל יכהנה, זה גורם המויקש, ועל כן מיד אחר זה קרוא הכוסף ירובעל שנאמר, וילך ירובעל בן יואש. So the reason why all of a sudden we're transforming again from the name Gideon to Yerubal, which is a name his father gave Moshe Avodah Zarah, because since Gideon was mixed in and went and he gave in this ephod and trophim that people were Zayne Achrov, this news from Avodah Zarah we're talking about. Therefore, he was Ne'anash, Lebeisel Moikish. Soon we're going to see what the Einish that he got, Gideon. And therefore, the next pasuk, even though right a pasuk afterwards is going to become Gideon. Vayelech Yerubal ben Yoyash Vayeshev beveisei. After this ephod became Avodah Zarah, he went home. He retired. He's no longer a shayfet. Ule Gideon hoyu shivim bonim yoytze yereichoi ki noshim rabbis hoyuloi. Listen to this. Gideon HaShayfet has 70 sons. Ki noshim rabbis hoyuloi shtek rishonim. Since the Barbanel in Akdoma makes the 5 nafkeminas between the shayfet and the melech has a isur of liyarbelei noshim. Can't take more than 18 maximum according to the Mandoma, the biggest shiur. And Gideon, Shteido, since Gideon was Shofet, he didn't do anything wrong. Hoyu Shivim Bonim, he had a lot of women, Noshim Rabbi Shteit Nishviful, and he had 70 sons all getting killed in a minute. All getting murdered in a minute, besides one little Yosem blibes, and that's going to be the next parak. But the Oynesh that he got, Biglal, taking and perpetuating something which is kavona was l'toive, but was something which turned out to be Avodah Zarah va'iznu achrov. He's called Yerubal. We bring him back to Avodah Zarah part, and the oynesh is going to be he's going to lose all his sons besides 2. Listen to this. Upilagsho yasher b'Shechem yoldo loy gam hi bein vayosem eshmoy Avimelech. Besides the 70 people, besides the 70 sons that he had from multiple women, he had a Pilagsho. And that Pilagsho gave him birth to a son. In other words, all the children were with different mothers. They all had the same father, Gideon. He had Noshim Rabbis, he had 5, 10, I don't know how many were, but Noshim Rabbis, by states a lot of Noshim. And if the Rishonim say that he wasn't either on the Lav, the Barbanel says, well, the Album Noshim apparently was more than 18. So he had 20 women, and he had with each one 3.5 children. And he had 70 boys. And besides that, a Pilagsho. And from that Pilagsho, he has a son called Avimelech HaRosho. We're going to soon see he's taking over after, in a minute, he's going to be the one taking over from Gideon. Vayomos Gideon beyosh b'seiva toivo vayikover bekerev. Before we go in, I just want to complete this couple of psukim. Vayikover bekerev Yoyash oviv be'ofra v'yezer. His father, Tshuva. If you remember, his father was a Ovid Avodah, was a Koimel Avodah Zarah. If you remember, I said the story at the time. I don't know if people remember. The Bocher from the Miri Yeshiva, his father wasn't so frum, and he came to Rabbi Yerucham the Mashgiach 2 weeks before Pesach, and he wants to go to be with his father, but he wants to stay by the Mashgiach for the Yontif. He says, "Favos, was willst du bleiben?" He said, "Mein Tate nicht das Greise für mich." Pesach, but the Tate was a ponimot, so I'd rather stay by the Mashgiach. Mashgiach pulled out a Sefer Shoftim, and he showed him that gleich in Umfang, in the beginning, in the Boyaz, he says that the Gideon was a tzaddik esed olam, and right in the beginning when he meets the Malach Hashem, he says, "V'ayei kol niflo Esau asher sipu lo no aveiseinu." He tells the Malach, Zokt Rashi, Pesach hoyo, Omar loy emesh shikrani abo esahalo, ushma'ativ shoyomer b'tzeis Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. ואתו נטשון, אם צדיקים היו עושים יעשו לבזכוסו, אם רשעים היו, כשם שעשו להם נפלא יסו חינם, כן יעשה לו לביאת כל נפלא יסו. שתי דור, his father is a kramer of Avodah Zarah. He had a par muktzeh, a par nevad, and a mizbeach of Avodah Zarah. He's the greatest kramer of Avodah Zarah. Emesh, when is the Gideon encounters with the Malach for the first time? Pesach morning. And what does it say? Emesh, Yikrani Abba Yishalo. So Gideon the Tzaddik, where is he spending Pesach night? With his father Yoyash the Oyev in Zorah. Where did he hear the Hallel? Emesh Yikrani Abba. So Biruchim Pesach is a Yontov's Mizitz with the Tate. Tate kezayin a Reform Yid. The Tate kezayin a Koimel of the Zorah. But Pesach night, to get the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim, you get it from your father. Geya Heim for Heim. This is a story, a Bavusta story. But this Yoyash made tshuva. And how did the Rishonim know he made tshuva? Weil sie steht, Vayikover bekever Yoyash oviv beofro. Gideon a tzaddik. Gideon was tzaddik mit chilos and atzof. This Moikish came out of his effort. No, but he was given a tzaddik. He was from Moisra Teire. He was einer for the Shoftim. And this Gideon is buried. He told him, I want to be buried. Bekever Yoyash oviv, together with the father. The father, Tshuva Giton. This Yoyash was a Kohen of Avodah Zorah after the whereabouts of what. I mean, this is 40 years. The story is 40 years later. I don't know when his father was nifter. Apparently, his father was Seif Yom of his Chaza B'Tshuva, and Gideon is buried next to him. I'd like to focus today on a shaila, which is a very, very extensive subject, compounded subject. Gideon is marrying 70 wives, and he takes a Pilagsho. I want to read you two Rambams. Before we start, I don't know how much I have, I brought down, but I want to give you two Rambams. The Rambam says, there's two Rambam. One Rambam begins in Hilchos Ishus, and one Rambam is in Hilchos Melachim. The Rambam in Hilchos Ishus says like this: Koydem matan Torah yodem pegei isha b'shuk, rotzo hu vehi noisen l'schor boy loisa alem aderech v'hoilech le. Before matan Torah, there was no parsha of kiddushin. Somebody met the isha. How much do you want? $100, and it's mutar. Azay given them the nusach. And that was the Maaseh Yehuda and Tamar. He gave her, she was a Kedesha, but Kedesha was mutar before Matan Torah. Vezui anikres Kedesha. Mishenitna Torah ne'esro ha-Kedesha, shene'emar lo yisiya Kedesha b'bnei Yisrael. Lefichach kol ha'boyel isha l'shem desnus b'loi Kiddushin, lo yike min ha-Torah b'pnei shebo al Kedesha. There's an Isser of Be'ilas Kedesha, and somebody goes and is boyel a isha l'shem desnus, he's over a lav min ha-Torah von loi tiyeh Kedesha. Also steht in the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Melachim, the Rambam brings down all the dinim of the Melech. Steht the Rambam and say, the Melech has a reshus to do whatever he wants. He's basically ruling. Reshus liyad ha-melech koitzev meches v'shelech v'lokech giboyrim an shechayil v'oisem anoshim lo b'tzafon v'shamoshim v'oindim. Melech really has a free ride. He can go to anybody. The Rambam says he has to pay. He can't go b'china, but he can take a chef, roichim, avodim, shfoches, v'noisen schor l'dmeim. Okay, so the Rambam says the Melech basically can go to anybody from Klal Yisrael, and if he doesn't listen, he's way b'malchus chayim. He said, I want you to be my lawyer, I want you to be my doctor, I want you to be my chef, I want you to be my bartender. The Rambam brings down all these examples, nicht mein example. Sog der Rambam, legt zu der Rambam, listen to this. V'chein lekeach mikol gvul Yisrael noshim upilagshim. A melech can take mikol gvul Yisrael noshim upilagshim. Noshim beksuba v'kidushim, v'pilagshim beloi ksuba beloi kidushim. Elo beyichud bilvad koine oiso umuteresle. Shita Sarambam, that a melech can force a woman. This is a major shayla to learn kiddushin. You need a dasa isha. How do you force a woman? You force a woman to marry you. You have to have noshim b'ksuba v'kidushim u'pilakshim nuschas haramba. We have other nischoyes beloi ksuba u'beloi kidushim. Elo beyichud bilvad koine also muteresle. Rambam likes to aval hahedyet also bepilegesh elo be'amo ivrio bilvad achariyut. Rambam says there's a chiluk between a melech and a hedyet. A melech can force a woman to marry him. If he marries her, he needs kiddushin eksuber. If he wants to take a pilegesh, he can take a pilegesh beloi kiddushin beloi ksuba. So what is it? He takes a woman. Why is she not a kedesha? He takes a woman beloi kiddushin. The Rambam says elo beyichud bilvad koine iso. She has to be miyucha to him. He's beyichud bilvad koine iso muteresle. Aval hahedyet, for some reason or another, the Rambam sticks it in here in Hilchos Melachim Hodish Kishayches. Rambam says aval hahedyet zos tovisenaich hahedyet osu bepilegesh elo be'amo ivrio bilvad. The only time a hedyet, the Rambam calls amo ivrio, she's nimkeresloi, and then if he wants achar shifchus, he wants to be miyad and take her. So the Rambam says that the pilegesh of a hedyet is the amo ivrio al yedei iyud, achar iyud. And the Rambam says, v'yesh lo lasas ha-pilagshim, tabochos, v'oifos, v'roichos, He can make him anything he wants. But bottom line, Divra Rambam Boru Milalu. A melech can take any woman he wants, Bekidushin and Beksuba. He can take any woman, Shaloi Kidushin, Shaloi Beksuba, and she's a Pilagish. And she's Muteres Lovoy Aleo, Al Yadei Yichud Bilvad. And the Rambam likes too, that a Hedyot is Osur Bepilagish. Only, when do we find Azah Heter from somebody living with a wife, with a woman, without being Kiddushin and Ksubo? By Yud, Amo Yivriyo, by Shichur, you can be Miyah there, and the Rambam calls us, that's the Heter of Pilagish. We'll deal with it in a minute. The Kasha is like this. According to the Rambam, comes out that only Melech is Muta Bepilagish, Hedyot is also Bepilagish. Also Bepilagish means to say that a guy takes a woman, Shaloi Bekiddushin Beksuba, the Rambam says he's over the law of Lo Yekodesh, Lo Yichdesh. He's over the law of Midarais. One of the 5 chilukim between a melech and a shofet state in Ababanel, that a melech is allowed to have as many noshim as he wants, and he's allowed to have a pilegish, whereby a shofet as a din of a hedyot, he's not allowed to take as many women as he's allowed to take fakert. He's allowed fakert. But melech has a limit for 18. On shofet nish, like we said, that's why Gideon took noshim rabbis. And the melech can take pilakshim, but a hedyot can't, and therefore a shofet is a din of a hedyot, and they cannot take a pilagish. The kana ben shoel, if that's the case, how are you Gideon, a shofet, not a melech, take a shivcho to become your, and she's the mother of the next shofet who's called Avimelech. This is the kasha was licht off. It's very interesting. The Meir Simcha has a shtickle Torah. Why is the melech really muta bepilegish? Meir Simcha has a shtickle Torah. Meir Simcha says that the reason why is because there is a isur to be mishtamesh besharvitei shel melech. You're not allowed to take isusoy or sharvitei. Anything which belongs to the melech is secluded. When the melech dies, he can't give it over even to his son. If his son becomes a melech, Rambam says, it's like more Sanhedrin. You take all the belongings of the melech, you burn it up. What's with a wife of a melech? A wife of a melech cannot be married. Take the Rambam, and when a melech dies, his wife, the Rambam says, "Kovet godel noyagi bemelech ein mishtamshi besharvita and yeshim al kisrei v'lei bekisrei ukshu meis kulam nisrofim v'chein lo yishtamesh be'avodov v'shivchoisov v'shamoshov el melech acher." A shivcho in avodim is allowed to be used by a different melech. Lefichoch Avishag oisa muteros l'shloimei v'asuro l'adonio. State in the Rambam. Sech tagmor in Sanhedrin. Shloimei was a melech, so Avishag Ashunamis was a sechenes. She wasn't a wife. She was a sechenes. She was muter to Shloimei because Shloimei was a melech achrov, but Adonio ben Chagis, who he wanted to become a melech, didn't become a melech. He was also to have what's his name. Aval ishtoi shel melech eino niv'eles le'acher le'oilom. A wife of a melech can never ever be nival to another man. Afilu ha-melech eino noise almonosoi o grushosoi shel melech acher. Chiddush. Ram says, whenever the melech dies, he has almona. Another melech cannot take his wife. Furthermore, a melech was married to a woman and divorced her. And now she is a grushas ha-melech. Another melech cannot take the grusha if she was once upon a time a wife of a melech. As I state, Zokter Meir Simcha, Shtekotere. As a Yois, Zokter Meir Simcha, that she's, why is the melech muta bepilegish? Either is no kiddushin, no ksuba. So melech is efke petrishke, aveir shebeter, we lost and gained me'ados. Zokter, bibalt is also li'ishtamish, b'sharvitei shel melech, you're not allowed to use it. So Mele she's miyuchedes loy, Mele she's not called a Kedesha. The fact that nobody else could use her, it's a big Weltschiddish. The fact that nobody else could use his wife, she can never ever be married to him, so she's secluded to him, and therefore she's not called Azay Zokta Meir Simcha. What?
That's a wife, it's not his wife yet.
No, you didn't prove.
I'm saying, we're talking about somebody, a
Pilagish. Why
Pilagish.
should he take the Pilagish?
No. He says the reason why she's a Pilagish of the Melech. Now, the reason why he says the reason, because in the second he's Meyacheh there and she becomes his, she is right away at that very moment becomes mufka from anybody else. Nobody else ever can have be with her. So Mimela Zocht Omer Simcha Azaz Sot is Ramstein is Meyacheh there.
That's not din only by Ish, only by a wife.
That din that the Rambam says, we'll get to it in a minute, because the Rambam says, the Rambam says the issue of Ya'abeli Noshim, Ben Noshim, Ben Pilagshim. The Pilagish is counted as one of the 18 women that Lo Ya'abeli Noshim.
Second melech will take over.
So now allowed to take a second melech can't even take a Pilagish.
Pilagish of the first melech.
So Mimele, okay. So Mimele, hello? Vibalt is secluded. We'll see. We'll see. 1 second. We'll see in a minute. Okay. I want to go before I go any weiter. The Ravid comes again. Can I continue? The Ravid comes again. The Rambam says that anybody that Odom Pageh Beisha Bashuk, Far Matan Teire, she was a Kedesha, she was Materes. After Matan Teire, somebody takes a woman without Chup and Kiddushin, and without, Kiddushin and Ksuba, she's a Kedesha, and Zoy Velav. Comes again the Ravid, I didn't bring it down, comes again the Ravid, Omer Avrom, Ein Kedesha, Elo Mezumenes, Via Mufkeres Lekol Odom. אבל מייחדס עצמו לאיש אחד, אין בה לא מלכוס ולא איסולב, והיא הפילגש הכסוב. זוג דרייבת, nicht richtig. כדי somebody is מפקרס עצמו לזנוס. But somebody is מיוחד for one person, there's no כסוב, no, on חופה, on קידושים, זוג דרייבת, אבל she's a פילגש אמור בתאר. הוא בא להלושן דרש עם פילגש, מילו הפוכו, הוא מורכבס, בפי שגל, עומדת לפרקים למשכב, משמשת הבית ופעומר למשכב. That's a פילגש. אוקיי? ויש ספורים, זוג דרייבת, שכוסוב בוהם פילגשים קידושין בלוי כסובה. Rambam says a pilegesh is beloi ksuba, beloi kiddushin. Some forms say pilegesh also needs kiddushin, but you don't make a ksuba. As they bring the Raiva. Aval, zog the Raiva, mikol mokom ein isu lav elo b'mezamenes atzmo lechol odom. She'im kidvorov me'ato eich mishalim alea momen v'alaleike oleo ve'elo vadai mishi utzricho lepitui ein ogdesha. Shita sarayved, that avade the Isur, the Rambam says any time a person takes a woman without Kiddushin and Ksuba, she has a din of Pilegesh, and Pilegesh is Asur Le'edyet. And if you boil her, you over on the lawful L'siyakdesha. The Ravid learns, first of all, there's a gear that in Pilegesh alone there has to be Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. Or Be'iyah Mashiyah of the Ravid, if she's Mafkeres Atzmol as news, so then he's over the lawful L'siyakdesha. But if he is gehört von Reb Nochem Parzovich Amol, was Shalashud saying is Amol reingekommen zum Briskerov, somebody asked him a kasha, Shita Saramam Kiddushin Kesef is only the Rabban, it's not the Raisa. So according to the Rambam, Mishnah according to the Raivich, has to be Miachedes Atzmol L'snus. But according to the Rambam, every time is B'lei Kiddushin, B'lei Ksuba, there is a lava. It's Yeder Kiddushin Kesef, so Evers and the Isur for Leis Yekdesh. So ich gehört am Anfang von Reb Nochem. I'm not involved right now, I'm not learning Kiddushin. Okay. Briskerov told him, afilu as nishkin, ob es darf sein Abias Nus, nishkin Bias Ishus. Abias Ishus is nishkin Nus for the Ziyekdesh. It's the Kadisher, even though the Kiddushin is not Cham the Reis, it's the Rambam, the Kiddushin Kesef is only the Rabban. But when you making Kiddushin, Bias Nus Idus nicht. But that's what somebody came to ask. According to the Rambam, the Reis, how could somebody in the Kaddish, Isha Bekesef, is over a law from the Sichteish. I say when the kasha was defect, when I said Mengev. I would like to focus on that you have by you. Look at the Kesef Mishnah. So we have a kasha. How does Gideon Hatzadik HaShofet, who doesn't have a din of a melech, is marrying besides his wife, 70 wives, besides his wife that gave him 70 children, he's taking a pilegesh for a woman and he has a son with her. How does he do it? Look at the Kesef Mishneh. Kesef Mishneh brings the Ramban. It's nicht meine Kasha. The Kasha is the Ramban's Kasha. So that's Shuvas Ramban. Look at reference number 4. Kesef Mishneh fragt er Ramban yikshe zei sal Rambam umotzinu gdoile Yisrael noisin oisa shenema ve'efo pilegesh kolev yol. There's a pasuk in Divrei Hayomim. Kolev had 3 wives. Azuvo, and he married Miriam, and he married Basya Baspare. And then he had Ga'at Avaim Eifo. I always said, somebody once came to the Sons of Ruv, gefragt, how much older can a woman be? So they're writing him a shidduch. The lady's 14 years older, if you can make a shidduch with her. Came to Sons of Ruv. Sons of Ruv told him, Shefer Chaim, he told him, be zibbitz in you, came in the house. If the woman is older by 17 years and the man, it's okay. The raya was from Yocheved and Amram. Yocheved was 17 years older than Amram. I'm not going to make the cheshbon here. We're going to stay here till midnight. But I said that there are 2, this Kolev that we're speaking about right now, he took 2 wives, and both wives were 48 years older than him. The erste Zach, Divasam Gelerem Do, Sefer Yeshua no. Kolev was, it says, when he came to ask for Chevron for his Nachla, he comes to Yeshua, he says, remember, I was 40 years old when you sent me, and Moshe sent me and you Meraglim. Okay? The Gemara learns in Poschatos, how do you know Shemesh Akipshu Shemesh Achilku? He was 85 years then. But he was 40 years old, just let's get to the bottom of it. He was 40 years old when he went out with the Shlichus and the Meraglim Pasha Shlach. When did he what's his name? He was 85 years later, after 40 years in the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu was 81 by the time he sent them around. Moshe was 81. Miriam, Kayodua, was 6.5 years older than her brother, almost 7 years older than her brother Moshe. So if Moshe was 81, so she was 86, 87 when he was 40. The Machtashidach mitir, steht Agmor in Soite, he married her. So when Thomas Azuva Ishes Kolev, he went and he married Miriam. So he took a woman 40 years older. The same thing, Basya Baspara, the same cheshbon. She's the one to save Paro. So, Oysel, the erste vibe, the zweite vibe, the dritte vibe, he had also a Pilagish. And the Pilagish had a Pilagsho. Look at the pasuk. He brings the Rambam brings down the pasuk. Ve'efo Pilagish Kolev Yoldo. Gideon Shoifet Shediber Boy Hashem, Ksiv Boy in Zloshen Ramban, Pilagsho Shel Gideon Yoldo. Ve'Pilagish Bagivu Yois Asur Elohim Vayokom Isho, Vayoim V'Ksiv Al Chasonoi, V'Gamoyim Nizbaish Bezimosoi. If he was a Yisur, he would be Fashem, the ganze Meiser of Pilagish Bagivu, and he calls him Isho, and he calls him Chasano Yishver, he calls him Eidim. Zok de Kesef Mishneh Ve'ein Mikol Eile Tshuva Al Divrei Rabbeinu. The Hikal Meima the Anach Pilagshim Hayu Amo Ivrio Lachayu. If you remember the Rambam that we read before, the Rambam says that Melech is Muter Bepilegesh, but a Hedyot is also Bepilegesh, which means Shaloi Kiddush Shaloi B'Ksuba Elo Amo Ivrio B'Yud. Zokter, you should know that this Gideon that hin Ba'unz Hotam Akind, the woman that he married, she used to be his Amo Ivrio, and this is Achar Yud. And Achar Yud, he says, Dr. Kesef Mishneh, Sinishkin Grei Sekashe, he brings down Sinishkin Grei Sekashe, that it's, what's his name? This is all Loshen Ramban. Anybody that wants to know, Chuvas Ramban, Siman Reish Pei Dalet, the Ramban, Frek the Kashe, and Zok the Teretz, Gideon is marrying his Pilegesh, Al Yadei, he took her first an Amo. She was an Amo Ivrio and Achashiko. The problem is with this whole thing, is very, very, what's his name? And by the way, if anybody has over here Shoftim, you look at later in Pasuk Yudches, when Yosem says the Moshel to Anshe Shechem about Avimelech taking and killing all his brothers and this and this and that, so he writes him, Vatamlichu, he writes him, take a look, you have it in the reference, Vatamlichu, Es Avimelech ben Amosoi al Baal Shechem. He calls him Yosem, the Einzige Kind who escaped this mass murder of Avimelech, who killed all his brothers, half brothers, He calls him Vayatamlichu es Avimelech. He's giving him Musar Ben Amos. He's not calling her a Pilegesh. He's calling her Amo. So the Mitzudas David Ben Amos and Ben Shivchoser. V'lo mibnei Yishto Agviro. So you see that a Ben Amo is the Apilegesh is called Ben Amo. So there's a shtickle riot to support to the Ramban Zukimte that we're talking about. A Shivcho, she was an Amo Ivriyo Lacha. The only problem is, this is the problem. What shayches does Pilegesh have to Amo Ivriyo Lacha Yud? The Gemara in Kiddushin Daf Yudches is a shayla in the Gemara. Yud. What is Yud? What is Yud? Steht in Teire that once you meshachet the Amo Ivriyo, she goes out, and one of the Trochim she goes out. So as Machlekes in Gemara, Moes HaRishayin is the Kiddushin need know on that. When he bought the Amo, he gave money. If Moes HaRishayin is the Kiddushin, or maybe Shovek Kesef, or maybe Pruta Achroin or Maaseh Yadayim. Malkoponim, and the Gemara has a shayla, if Yud makes Eirusin, or Yud makes Nisuim. As I steht in Gemara. What's Nafkemine? Nafkemine is Leyorshel, Letamelo, Lehofen Edereah. If it's Kiddushin Oiso, so he's not Yerisha because she's not Nisuo. But if it's Nisuim Oiso, it's Yerisho, Metamelo, Lehofen Edereah. Malkoponim, there is a Kiddushin here. There is a Maaseh Kiddushin. Either Moes HaRishayin the Kiddushin Nitnu, or Shaveh Pruta that he has a Maaseh Yadayim that lets the dog, whatever is Gibul by Shaveh Pruta, with that is Mekadisher. So what is the Zushtel? The Rambam says that Hedyot is Muta Bepilegesh only by Amo Ivriyo Achar Yud. By Pilegesh is on Kiddushin, on Ksub according to the Rambam. So what's the Zushtel? Well, Shtickle Telefon B'Saz Alman, Zokten Yeshivas. When you learn the sugya from in Kiddushin Daf Yudches, so Mrs. Alman says Shtickle Telefon about she's also with the Rabbanon. She's also with the Rabbanon. Why? Because we passed the Yud Eirusin Oiso. So it's only Eirusin. She's asur to him. Therefore, the Rambam calls the Pilegesh that she's asur to anybody else, but she's muteres to the Odin. So the fact that it's only making Kiddushin, the Kiddushin by anybody else, the person is not allowed, till he is Machnisa L'chupa, he's not allowed to be boiler, she has a Yisur, and the Odin could be boiler after Yud. We pass the Yud Kiddushin Oiso. In Mele, that's what it's called. She's muteres to the Odin through Yichud, and she's not muteres to anybody else. That's as a Zokter Shtikulter. You know, the Rav Magid has another girsa in the Rambam. I don't know if I brought it down. The Rav Magid is another girsa. Look at the Rav Magid in reference number 9. He brings another girsa in the Rambam. Pilegesh is Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. Okay, and Frek the Kesef Mishneh, the Rambam alone, where I just read you in Hilchas Melochim, says befeirish that Pilakshim is B'lei Kiddushin and B'lei Ksuba. The Rav Magid wants to name on in Shitas Rambam. He has a girsa in the Rambam, but Pilegesh is Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. But he says you can make another girsa, but you're not going to help you because the Rambam says befeirish in Hilchas Melochim that a melech is muta b'Pilakshim B'lei Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. So what's happening? I'm sorry? No, the Ravid brings down another girsa. The Ravid himself brings down another girsa. But the Ravid Stam holds that she's not a K'deisha, because once he's miyuchedes lo, he's not K'deisha. That's the Ravid. The Ravid says, B'lei Kiddush, B'lei Ksuba, Hedyot is muter. Shita Sarayve, that Hedyot is muter b'Pilegesh, in as much as miyuchedes lo. That's the Ravid Shita. But this is a steer Kivyochel in the Rambam. Rav Magid brings down that the Rambam in Hilches Ishus learns that Pilegesh is b'Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. The Rambam in Hilchos Melachim says the Melech takes B'lei Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba, and the head that is also only by Amo Ivriyo Achar Yud. By Stois is steer in the Rambam. So there's a shtickle term from the Makne in Kiddushin. The Makne comes along and says that there's a chilik between Pilegesh of Melech and Pilegesh of Hedyot. Pilegesh of Melech, the Rav Magid is moeded to the Rambam, it's B'lei Kiddushin only be Yichud. That's what the Rambam said, that Hedyot is also Pilegesh, is Kiddushin B'lei Ksuba. He wants to say there's a chilik. Which Pilegesh are we talking about? Are we talking about Pilegesh of Melech? And there's a Chuvas HaRivosh. Take a look at Chuvas HaRivosh. Chuvas HaRivosh bring you Yishlema B'das HaRambam. Take a look at reference number 12. The Pilegesh LeMelech Muteres B'lei Kiddushin. Ve'af the Behedyot Yesh B'zeh Mishum K'deisha V'bias Nus Mikol Makoim Ein Adover Ken Lefi שההדר שלו נלמד מפרשת המלך, יש לו רשוס ליקח נושם ופילגשים, ומכוח זכוס המלכוס אין כאן זנוס כלל. This is the Koter from the Rivosh. The Rivosh says that by Melech she's mutter without Kedushin. Why? Because since the Melech has a right, Midine HaMalchus, to take any Isho, to take anybody forever, to take anybody, he has a right to marry a woman Baal Kocho. He has a right also to take a woman, Pilagsho, B'lei Kedushin, B'lei Ksuba. So she becomes Midine HaMalchus Meshubet to him. Therefore, Machmas, the Chalois shame, Baal Kocho, as the Melech could bestow himself upon anyone. He can marry a woman, regular Kedushin, and force her to marry him. So he can take a woman, B'lei Kedushin, B'lei Ksuba, and make her Pilagsho. That alone is afkor on the Din's Nus. Asheinke beheaded, he doesn't have that. Bottom line, if she's designated to him, there has to be a certain designation. By a Melech, as we saw, either the Shtikoteri we saw for the Simcha, the reason why she's muter is because she's also to anybody else. There has to be some kind of yichud. It's nishkin hefker petrishke. A Pilagsho is not a vortiz, the Melech, all of a sudden, the Shulchan Aruch from the Siyah Kedesha is not valid by Melech. It's nicht richtig. A Melech is 100% equal to a Hedjet, and all Dinat is mutim. The only thing is, in order for her to be Kedesha, has to be without a framework. So by Melech, the framework is the fact that he has Midina Malchus, and he could force it, Malchus, to take any woman that he wants, either for Kedushin, force her Kedushin and Ksuba to become a wife. He could take a Pilagsho also to make her into his Pilagsho, B'lei Kedushin, B'lei Ksuba, Machmas, the Din Malchus that he has. But the Rambam says, look at the Lashon of the Rambam from the beginning. The Rambam says, the what? Look at the very first reference that we have. L'keach mikol gvulis noshim pilagshim noshim miksuba v'kedushin upilagshim b'lei ksuba b'lei kedushin elo b'yichud bilvad koyin oisa. The Rambam doesn't say that a melech has a psaheter in Pilagsho. Avada nisht. There's no such a thing that a person is a melech klapehim is gizogavon tafreish yud beis mitzvah. There's no aveira of l'siyah kedusha. Avada there is aveira of l'siyah kedusha. B'yichud bilvad. If he's miyached, if he's taking somebody designating with the yichud, this designation makes it afkor and the din that's not hefker mufkeres lakoil. B'yichud bilvad becomes his. By hedyot you can't have it. The same thing by Amor Ivri Yolachayud. Amor Ivri Yolachayud, there is a certain framework of Kiddushin. Yud Kiddushin also. So even though by a normal person is also bebiyeh with Kiddushin alone, Shtei do, as by Amor Ivri there was a heter. That's how the Rambam compares the din Amor Ivri Be'iyud to the din of Pilagsho. Bottom line, here by, according to the Ramban, and according to Kesef Mishnah, either we're going to go with the Girsa that it's Kedushin B'lei Ksuba or B'lei Kedushin B'lei Ksuba. Melech has a right to take either one of them not because he doesn't have the halacha of Isur Znus from Kedesha, just because he can be miyached through the Din HaMalchus and what Din Heter to be miyached her to him, and therefore she's not a Zainish, she's not a Kedesha. By Hedyot Kai Gavna, if he takes her, the Ravid learned, if she's not mufkeres lakol, if she's not stam hefker petrishke, she's muter, there's no love. She's only mafkeres atzmol znus. But if somebody's miyached there, it really boils down to one thing. If she's miyuchedes loy, there is no issue of loy yekdesha. The Rambam learns, miyuchedes can't stam have miyuchedes. A guy can't take a woman and says, you miyuched to me. The Rambam learns, anytime it's not done through a certain bona fide framework, it's a Kedesha. That's a machlekes the Rambam derived. Even if she's not mafkeres atzmos. Some guy wants a woman, is a halacha for l'siyah Kedesha. Unless there is some kind of a yichud. By Melech, it's a yichud machmas dina malchus, and by Hedyot, it's through the din of Yud. And Yud gives him a right to be miyached her, to be mafker from Teira Zayno. Balkaponim, just nachzil in Yonenu, we got to finish. Nachzil in Yonenu. Sai kolev. Sai Pilagsho bagiva. And Sai Avimelech, Gideon who had Avimelech with the Pilagsho, we're talking about such a Pilagsho, we're talking about such a Pilagsho that he's really has the din of a Hedyot, and the Hedyot doesn't have a heter of Pilagsho, it's only a din in Melech, but he was miyached her for him. According to the Ravid, you don't have to say such a thing, because according to the Ravid, every Hedyot is muter if she's miyuchedes loy, as long as she's not mafkeres atzmol znus. according to the Rambam and the Ramban, that even when you meyached without a certain chalois din, there is a yisur kadeshin, you're not allowed to take it. You have to say by Kolev, which was a tzaddik, and by Gidna Shadiba by Hashem Loshan Ramban, she was miyuchedes loy. Why? Because we're talking about she had Amu Ivrio, she's miyuchedes loy. We'll stop right here.